Welcome to Creating Effective Learning Environment in Montessori. What does it mean by creating an effective environment? We will learn in this presentation how we can create an environment that supports optimal growth for our children. I'm Disha Bonner. I'm a certified Montessori guide for primary and lower elementary. I'm also a teacher trainer for Center for Guided Montessori Studies and a user experience designer and a content creator. I also own a small Etsy shop, Oak and Earth Goods, selling my Montessori resources. This is the place where I get to be creative in Montessori. In this presentation, together we can learn Montessori principles to create a prepared environment, importance of sensitive periods and the planes of development, what it means to create a literacy rich environment at school or at home, and role of the guide in creating a prepared environment. Montessori prepared environment is not something that we can just create by watching a video on Instagram or reading a blog. It is much deeper. Together, let's learn how we can create an environment that is conducive to learning, that allows exploration and curiosity. Before we can dive into creating a prepared environment, let's learn what Dr. Montessori said about this plane of development. For 0 to 3, Dr. Montessori calls this a very crucial phase in a child development. It is also referred as a spiritual embryo. Therefore, it's very important that when we are creating an environment, we understand that environment should cater to the needs of the child that is in front of us. The environment is not designed for an adult. Prepared environment is catered to the need of the child. And any environment that restricts the movement or exploration is not a prepared environment. Our job as a facilitator and as a guide is to make sure that we deeply understand the work of the child. This is the first step before we even dive into creating any space, whether we are at home or at school. We must learn what it means to understand the sensitive periods for this age group. Let's look at the planes of development that Dr. Montessori talked about. Dr. Montessori created the divided planes of development into four areas. 0 to 6 is a early childhood time where Dr. Montessori explained that it's an absorbent mind. 0 to 3 is an unconscious absorbent mind. That means that the child is soaking up the information from the environment. They're learning from their senses without consciously paying attention to the learning. Therefore, it's very important that when we create this environment, it is carefully designed and it promotes curiosity, creativity, and learning. In this stage of the child's life, they are focused on themselves. They are in an egocentric phase. It's all about their needs, their physiological and psychological needs. And number one need in Maslow's hierarchy of need is the physiological need, the need for nutrition, sleep, clothing, fresh air. Very important. Once these needs are met, the child moves to the safety needs. This is this is where the adult can create routine and consistency and predictability to create safe and secure environment for the child. When the child feels safe and secure, they move on to the need of love and belonging, where they need their primary caregiver to show them that they're accepted and loved no matter what. This is where the child learns to move on to other higher needs and the learning takes place. When the child's physiological, safety, and love and belonging needs are met, child can move to a next stage of learning where they can learn to develop esteem, self-esteem and ultimately self actualization. The goal of the prepared environment is not for us to teach reading and science and math. The goal of the prepared environment is for a child to learn self actualization, is for a child to learn the joy of learning and create the inner joy. Let's talk about what is a prepared environment then. In a Montessori, prepared environment is a learning space designed to encourage children to explore, to discover, and learn independently. The environment must promote self directed learning. There are six basic principles that we must adhere to when we are creating the environment. The environment should promote freedom, it should be orderly and aesthetically pleasing. The environment should promote collaboration and socialization. Unlike a traditional school where the students are isolated and to learn on their own, Montessori promote collaboration and socialization. We learn from one another. It's a basic human need, and we cannot restrict socialization in the classroom. It's very important that we understand that the children should be talking with each other. They should be learning how to talk with each other. This is the basic need of human. We cannot restrict that. The intellectual environment, this is where the Montessori materials come in place. Learning to pick correct Montessori material is very, very important when we're preparing the environment. And we'll talk about that later in the presentation, where I'll give you example why certain materials are not considered Montessori. Nature is a big part of Dr. Montessori's philosophy, where children should have access to learn from the nature, to be able to observe the nature during the day, to be able to go out when they have the need to go out, to work outside. Nature and reality, working with real things. And that's a little bit of a controversial too from other philosophies where the play is a big important part. Dr. Montessori talks a lot about reality and using real materials. That's why there is no such thing as a play kitchen in Montessori classrooms. All the materials in the Montessori classrooms are about the sense to create a sense of self care and the care of the environment. And these are done with real materials, with real life things. It's very important that we understand this before we create the prepared environment. The prepared environment has three important aspects: the child, the adult, and the environment. The child is continuously learning from the environment and the adult. Therefore, it is very important for the adult to understand how to prepare themselves and care for themselves. Before the adult enters a prepared environment, they need to carefully go through and discard their own personal biases and reflect on things to understand themselves better. They need to understand that their language is not just words, but their body language and their facial expression needs to be calm and composed because this is what will create an environment that is calm and peaceful. An adult, when carefully works on themselves, they can understand and observe the child better without biases, without judgment. And when we observe the child without biases and judgment, we can create the best environment for the child. Remember, it's the environment that teaches the child, not the adult. Adult is the facilitator in creating that environment. But the child must learn from the environment and be be self-directed. This is the step one in creating the lifelong journey of learning. When the child become independent and self-directed learner, they find joy in learning, they find concentration and self-actualization. This is our ultimate goal with the environment. That's why we deeply study the work of the child in the sensitive periods so we can create the best learning environment for the students. Creating a Montessori environment is it's very simple if we think about if we keep in mind about certain principles. Number 1, I feel this is the most important, is that environment must serve the child. Having a desk that shows a hierarchy, a teacher desk and a teacher chair that shows a hierarchy of roles in the classroom is not Montessori, because that is not a space for the child. A teacher's desk is not a space for the child, and that conveys the wrong message. In a Montessori prepared environment, there is no such thing as a hierarchy. The child and the guide are at the same level. They're both learners. They're both learning from each other. The environment must serve the child that is in front of you, not in any imaginary child that you thought that a Montessori should look like or would look like. It is the child that is in front of you. And the dynamic of the classroom may change according to the year or the children that you have. If you are creating a Montessori environment for home, it must serve the child that you have at home, not an imaginary child that is in the school. So keep that in mind, that we are not adhering to our biases and judgment and creating an environment according to our needs, because I've seen that often happening, and as adults we often slip into these habits that we have created from years and years of experience. It requires work, but it's very rewarding if we do it correctly. The guide must develop deep reverence for the work of child. If there is no respect and reverence for the work of child, we will create the environment, but we will not allow the freedom of exploration and learning. So it's very important that an environment can do only so much if we are not respecting the work of the child. Prepared environment is not just about the material or the shelves or the pretty tables or Montessori materials that we have. It's about the prepared adult. A prepared environment can never work with the most beautiful materials if there is no prepared adult in the classroom. And when I say prepared adult, it means an adult who is willing to learn from the child. An adult is open minded and allows curiosity and creativity in the classroom. The guide must understand the sensitive periods for different planes of development to be able to create the environment for the child. Environment must be calm and supportive for children to develop deep concentration. This is the work of the child, and it's sacred. The space, this space is safe and sacred for the child, and it must be respected at all times. So, what are sensitive periods? There are a lot of them. I've listed a few of them here for this 0 to 3 age. Number one sensitive period that I think is the most important for 0 to 3 is the order. This is so important that we must continue to have predictable schedule. Recently in a school visit, a brand new Montessori micro school had created an environment, was beautiful environment with all the Montessori materials, and it was clean, neat, aesthetically pleasing. But the problem was that the guide and the director of the school kept changing the schedule of lunch and the recess. When this happens, it becomes unpredictable. Children do not know what is coming next. It creates chaos and confusion among children. Students kept wondering, are they going to eat first or are they going to go to recess first? And those questions kept coming during the morning work cycle. Children would go up to the guide and constantly ask them, Are we going to do the recess or are we going to eat? When this happens, although this was not a 0 to 3 classroom, when this happens, what it breaks the concentration because children are confused and they cannot go in the deep concentration and deeper work in the classroom. Now you might wonder, why is it so important? It's very important. It's very important because it does not create the joy of learning. The learning is not self-directed. The child is not going to go into a deep concentration work where they want to continue working because they're finding joy in working. The child is in the state of anxiety and agitation and confusion, and it's not the best for the child to learn in that environment. So it's keep in mind that order is not just about the materials on the shelf. The order is predictability and consistency in the classroom. An adults in the school creates this consistency. If you're at home as a parent, you can create order in day-to-day life where children can feel that there's a routine and a consistency. If there's a once a week you go to the library, let that be every Wednesday. You keep that, and that schedule is ahead of a time. Child has to be aware of it and knows. After a while, the child will be able to learn that, oh, it's a Wednesday, and then we go to the library or whatever that you do. Order is very important. Order of putting things in the right place, having a spot to put the shoes in the same spot, or putting your dishes in the same spot, or creating the order of left to right prepares their brain for reading and writing later. And we'll talk about a little bit about that as we go further in the presentation. And we'll do some exercise when how things will look when there's no order and how things should look when there is an order. Language. This is a very important sensitive period. In fact, a recent study done about brain development and language learning mentioned that in a 0 to 1, if a child does not hear certain sounds, that sounds may never be learned or may be severely delayed. Those same sounds. Because our brain is wired, human brain is wired to learn all the languages. 0 to 3 is a very, very important stage to expose children to as many languages as possible, as much music as possible, and as many books as possible, because when we talk to children and when we read to children, they are not just learning words, they are also listening to sound and pitch and rhythm and all these wonderful things that they are learning and deciphering and creating these new neuron pathways, right? So it's very important that we create a language literacy rich environment for not just 0 to 3 but 0 to 6, I want to say. And music plays a very important role in this stage because music can be fun, it can include movement, it can create teach complex concept of rhyming words or alliteration or whatever that you're trying to teach. Music is fun way to engage children in and add that literacy component as well with music. Children are also learning such social aspects of life. That means they're learning how to be in this social world, how to be a part of this world. And they're going to have a lot of emotions in this stage. So, creating a space that is emotionally safe for them to learn co regulation will be very important when we are creating that prepared environment. Affinity for small objects, learning through senses. As I've mentioned, they are an observant mind. They're constantly soaking information from their senses and from the environment. So it's important to include as many sensorial lessons where they can explore different textures, temperature, and just learn from the environment. So let's talk about how we design the environment. The first step that I had to do in my certification program was observe in the classroom at the child's eye level. So for an infant classroom, I had to lay down in the classroom and observe the ceiling or lay down on my tummy and see what would I see? What would a child see in this environment? And it was a very effective exercise because I got to see, oh, the child, or the only thing child is seeing here is the legs of the furniture, or they're just staring at the blank wall, or they're still staring at the ceiling, right? So it's very important for us to understand what are we putting in our environment and where we are putting it. Is the child facing the blank wall or the legs of the furniture? We have an ability to change that. We have an ability to put something in the child's eye level where which would promote critical thinking and social emotional development, or would promote exploration with their senses and make the environment as engaging and effective for learning as possible. Another exercise that I did during my residency was creating a classroom environment on a paper. So, the classroom you have, take a look at that and draw it out on a paper. And look at the flow. Where's the reading corner? Where's the peace corner? Where do you do the circle time? Is there enough space for movement and exploration? Can you see the flow? Is the flow need to be changed? These are all the things you can see concretely when you draw it all out and map it out. And this would help you understand what needs to be altered in the physical space of your prepared environment or what needs to be added to it. The 0 to 3 is a very crucial developmental stage. This is the stage when they are learning about themselves. So, the care of the self is the most important aspect in this environment. It's having a big mirror where children can see themselves dressed and learn how to dress themselves. Care of the environment, like window washing, table washing, caring for the plants, having access to the garden outside. These are things that would help children learn how to be a part of this world. I would highly, highly recommend not to have those cubed IKEA shelves in the classroom or in your home space, but have a simple bookcase with just two-tier bookcase that is at child's height where they can easily access the materials. When planning a Montessori shelf for homeschooling or for the classroom purpose, please remember when you're drawing it out that you include all curriculum areas. If you are doing a home shelf, you do not need all Montessori materials. You can create something simple. You can create something simple with what you have, and it doesn't have to be too much about learning. It's really all about exploration and engagement and learning to have independence and learning to be able to clean up after themselves. So these are the most important skills, is being able to take the material out from the shelf, take it to a rug, complete it and put it back. Just by in itself is teaching the child so much value in environment and keeping the environment beautiful, simple, clean. These are the skills we are trying to teach to the child for 0 to 3. When arranging a shelf, remember it's from left to right because that is the order of reading and writing that we are teaching. So it's from left to right, concrete to abstract. That means that your um, shelves should start with the most easiest work or skills. And then as they go further on the right side, it should build on making it harder and the and making it harder and harder as they go from top to bottom. So it's important to leave the materials organized and visually appealing. Materials should always be complete on the shelf. If there is anything broken parts, if anything missing, if it is too hard, then that material should not be on the shelf. It should be removed and you can put it back when you have it complete or when you replace it. Let's do a small exercise. This was one of the picture that I took from mentoring one of the Montessori toddler teacher in a Montessori school. And Take a look at it. Write down your observation. Which curriculum area is this? Do you think the materials are in correct order? If not, why? Are materials designed for a child to feel successful? It's very important that when we place a material on the shelf, it needs to build the sense of self achievement. If the child feels frustrated, it creates a feeling of inadequacy in children, and a child may not return to that work again. Material should build success. It can be slightly challenging, but it cannot be overly challenging. It needs to build a sense of self achievement. And every material, every Montessori material, should have a control of error. In this shelf, as a guide, I cannot understand if this shelf is sensorial, if it's open ended materials, if it's practical life, because I see some practical life on the top of the shelf. Are we teaching visual discrimination by size? Or are we teaching colors? What is it that we are teaching? Are we teaching nesting boxes by sizes? What exactly is going on here? I do not understand. If I do not understand it, children do not understand it. Montessori materials teaches the skills in isolation. If you look at the pink tower cubes, they're all pink because the purpose is not to teach color. The purpose is to teach visual discrimination by size. It's very important that when we buy materials or when we accept donation of the materials, we keep in mind the important aspects of Montessori materials. And the principles are control of error, teaching skills in isolation, close ended activities. Now, there's some room for open ended activities in Montessori for 0 to 3. However, it should only teach one skill in isolation and it should have control of error. So keep in mind that not all materials that claims to be Montessori on Amazon or whatever website that you go to is Montessori. Montessori materials would always teach skills in isolation and will have control of error. Let's do another exercise. Take a look at this shelf now. Write down your observation about materials and organization. What do you see is in correct order? How is this shelf arranged? Are the materials arranged from left to right, concrete to abstract, easy to hard? Are materials designed for a child to feel successful? And this is just for you to learn and self study about how some environment, even though it claims to be Montessori, whether it is on Pinterest or social media, is not Montessori, or even sometimes at Montessori schools, are sometimes not completely Montessori prepared environment. So, whether you're a parent or a teacher, keep in mind to observe and learn that not all materials are Montessori, and not all Montessori environment are correct. So let's look at the tips to create an effective learning Montessori environment. What do we see in Montessori environment? Well, the layout need to be in harmony. That means the shelves and the tables or the chairs or the furniture should not be overcrowding the space. The design should allow exploration and freedom of movement. Children should be able to move from tasks smoothly. As you can see in this environment, the tables and chairs are the correct size for the toddlers. The shelves are low. The shelves are not overcrowded with materials. There may be one or two or three items at the max on a shelf. The sink has a step stool for a child to feel successful washing their hands on their own without an adult's help. If a child constantly need an adult to help, that environment is not Montessori. A prepared environment must take that consideration in mind to have any area that is designed as much possible to be able, that child should be able to do the work independently on their own. This is how the child build the sense of self-achievement. And the more they build that, the more they're likely to do that work again and to be independent. These are a couple of the pictures from a home environment, and I just wanted to give that idea that a home environment can also have order and structure. Remember to have everything that a child need to complete the task, whether it is going potty in that area, whether it is clean underwear, wipes, perhaps a book to read for them to sit and practice going to the bathroom, a bin for a soiled underwear. All of those things need to be in that environment. A small step stool to get up and wash their own hands. Accessibility is the key. Children should have accessible materials and they should be complete. Children should be able to practice independence and autonomy in the environment. Whether it is putting their own shoes, the choices should be limited, one or two pairs of shoes, perhaps a hat, or if you live in a colder area, a jacket or whatever that they need to go out. A small mirror so they can see themselves before they go out. These are the things we can easily incorporate in a Montessori home that transitions and builds a bridge between Montessori home and a Montessori classroom. Montessori environment should always have order and beauty. The organization of the learning space is very crucial. In a well structured environment, fosters mathematical mind. That is the next plane of development, which is 6 to 12. Whatever we are doing in 0 to 6 is preparing the child for the next plane of development. In 6 to 12, the child's mind is into reasoning and justice. But they have to build that foundation in 0 to 6 by following the order and understanding the need of the self. Just from learning from that, they can move on to the next stage, which is the mathematical mind. Natural materials. Now, most Montessori schools keep as much as possible natural materials, but there are times when there's budget constraints and there's brand new school or whatever that is that we do have some plastic in the environment. And I would suggest that try to keep it as minimal as possible because natural materials have different energy. It has calming effect in the classroom. The plastic is used in a different way versus a wooden material. Children are much more careful and much more likely to take care of a glass container than a plastic cups when pouring. Not only it teaches them to be careful, but it also teaches them to slow down, which is very important because remember, our ultimate goal in a prepared environment is to develop self actualization, not teaching them reading and math. That is just what they will do once they will get to that place. It's just an indirect effect, I want to say. They will learn the reading and math just by the nature of it. But our goal is to create that joy of learning and to really slowing down the child and creating that calming effect. Simplicity. And I think like sometimes we do forget about this aspect of Montessori environment or we go overboard. I've seen Montessori classroom where every wall is covered with huge paintings that or posters or things that are artwork of the children. And I'm not saying that is wrong. What I'm saying is that the more simple environment it is, the more attractive attractive materials will be to the child. So if there's too many things, it can be distracting and chaotic for the child's mind. Keeping it simple and keeping it clean and complete is what will attract child to that work. So let's talk about creating a literacy rich environment. Now, when we talk about literacy rich environment, it doesn't have to be just reading the books to the children. It's really about understanding that literacy is everywhere. Whether we are creating unit study for a continent study, or learning about holidays, or learning about seasons or objects of, let's say, farm animals, we can create an environment that is literacy rich by including different materials in the classroom. I personally loved including a small CD player with headphones and a book to go with it. So the child can listen to the story while looking at the book. And this helped create the fluency as well as interest in reading a book. Often the children would love just listening to the story over and over. And I would change the story according to the month and the unit study that we are studying. If we are studying about Van Gogh, it would have a book about Van Gogh, excuse me, or about Europe. And creating these little literacy aspects or nuggets in the classroom can really help children love the sense of learning and reading as well. Another great way to include some literacy in your environment is creating labels for each lessons that you have on the shelf so the children can read when they go pick up the material, or at least pay attention to the structure of letters and the word and understand the visually what the word looks like. Adding books to different areas and concepts in the classroom is a fun way to add literacy in all areas of the classroom. Adding simple books in math area or in practical life or in sensorial is a great way to promote that literacy rich environment. At home, creating an accessible environment where they can learn from books or read books is a great way to create a literacy rich environment. So, having an open ended bookshelf, open face bookshelf where children can see the books as well as have access to different types of books, not just fiction, but nonfiction as well, or from different parts of the world, can create an environment that is fun and engaging for literacy development. Creating a home learning space is not hard because the idea is not about creating a space that is exactly same as the classroom. You do not need all the Montessori materials that are in the classroom, but having simple child size shelf or table and a chair where the child can exercise being independent. I've seen so many parents using high chair once the child start walking till they're 2.5 or 3 even sometimes. It's not appropriate for a child to sit in a high chair once they have learned how to walk, because they need to explore. And some of the reasoning parents can have is that they would not sit and they would walk around and not eat. um, and yes, that could be sometimes annoying for parents, but it's also important for children to exercise freedom and they learn from these moments. So having that simple small table and a chair, clean table and a chair for them to sit, perhaps look at some piece of art while they're eating is very important for them to learn how to be self-sufficient and have that sense of autonomy. I've also seen people creating small kitchenette for children to prepare their own snack or wash their own little dishes. That's a great way to incorporate some of the concept of freedom and movement and self-directed learning. It in the Montessori home if you're creating a Montessori space at home. Creating a home learning space, I would say examine the current layout, home layout of what you have, and try to create a yes space. It doesn't have to cost a lot. It can be as simple as putting away some stuff in a space where you don't have to lock it. So putting it away maybe on a higher shelf or a higher cabinet so the child can have access to all the lower cabinets and take out the pots and pans if they need to take out and play with them. Or it can be, something putting away the chemicals in a space that is not accessible to the child so they don't have to you don't have to restrict them from movement. And allowing the children to go around the house and explore, because I've seen these baby gates or playpen which are perhaps okay for somebody who is using it only from time to time for an emergency that they need to. But if a child is engaged in the playpen all day long, they're not learning much. They're not learning about the environment. Child should have access to looking outside the window or learning from the environment, preparing the food, helping you, washing the dishes or washing the table. Having access to these things will help them be a part of this world and help them be self directed and be an independent learner. So, creating that yes space is really important because it creates a sense of autonomy and helps with power struggle as well. Children like to feel that they have a power and they have a voice and they are heard, and they feel emotionally safe and secure when we create safe spaces for them to learn and explore with freedom. So keep that in mind. And when you're creating a prepared environment, remember, it is not about the materials, it is more about you and how you observe the child and respect the child's work. Thank you for joining me in this presentation. I hope you enjoyed and learned something from this. And I hope that with this presentation, you're able to create a wonderful, prepared environment for your child or for your classroom. Please feel free to email me if you have any questions. And I wish you all the best in your Montessori journey. Thank you.